There are some people that really embrace this time of life without any challenges whatsoever. But typically, there's a correlation between the level of achievement and the degree of struggle. So the higher you are, the more you struggle.
At MBA Chartered Professional Accountants, we have 3 core beliefs. 1, we believe that business owners are the most important people on the planet. 2, we believe that the traditional accounting firm business model is flawed and fails to serve you. And 3, we believe the MBA way gives you what you truly want and deserve, resources and advice that helps you grow your business and your life. This is the MBA Way podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the MBA Way podcast. We have today is Susan Latremoille. It's taken me only 5 minutes to figure out how to pronounce it properly, and I think I nailed it, Susan. I nailed it. There we go. It's a bit of a rough start to this podcast, but it's going to be a fantastic conversation because I'm really looking forward to highlighting what Susan does. It's very unique. She works with financial advisors and their clients to help them transition from the working life, from their business life into retirement. And there's a lot of things that people miss, especially financial advisors, on how to have the right conversation with their clients to help them with that transition. I'm super oversimplifying this, but Susan, I'm really looking forward to getting a little deeper into the conversation around that and for our listeners to understand that it's not just about, what the accountants do. We do the tax and the advisory and setting things up to make sure you got the cash flow there. But you deal with more on the softer side and the issues, the emotional issues. And that's something I really want to dive in with you. But before we get started, could you just give our listeners a little background on your journey and then what your mission is and your promise that you've made to yourself regarding the problem that you see in the industry right now with people looking to transition?
Yeah, certainly, Eric. Happy to do that. So I was a financial advisor for 38 years. And like many financial advisors in those days, it was really about selling stocks, bonds, product, and so on, and building investment portfolios and making sure my clients had the right type of insurance. It was all the hard stuff that we're trained as advisors to provide. And I always prided myself on taking a holistic approach. I wanted to always take a holistic approach to things. But what did that really mean? And it was more than just lip service to being a holistic advisor. It was, what are the needs of my clients? Putting myself in my client's shoes. What are the issues and challenges? What keeps them awake at 3 a.m. when they can't sleep? So anyway, during my 38 years, I worked with clients sometimes for 2 decades or more and watched them as they journeyed through their lives with their businesses or with their professions or careers. And what I started to notice was when they did sell or step away, that many of them were not as happy as they thought they would be. A lot of them thought that going to Florida and playing golf and taking some trips was going to be the panacea, was going to be the best time of their life, only to find that they were not as happy as they had expected. So I thought, as a professional advisor who prides myself on being holistic, why is this happening and what can I do about it? So that's what led me at the end of 2019 to actually sell my wealth practice to focus in this area, to actually do something about this problem, both for financial advisors and for their clients. So that led me to co-found Next Chapter Lifestyle Advisors with my business partner, Marianne Osher, at the beginning of 2020. And really, we wanted to approach the issue from 2 angles. One was to enable, train, empower financial advisors and accountants and lawyers, anyone that works with their clients on more than a transaction, but on a relationship basis, to be aware and knowledgeable about the issues and challenges that people face, and then what they, as professional advisors, can do about it. So let's back up for a minute and talk about some of those challenges that people face. We've coined a little acronym called SIPS. SIPS, S-I-P-S. What does that stand for? So when a business owner sells or a person retires, the first thing that tends to go is their social connections. The people they worked with that they thought they would still meet for lunch, they would still be friends and so on. But often what happens is the reason for their connection falls away when they're no longer working together. And those relationships don't last very long. So someone moving into this phase of their life has to reestablish new social connections. Maybe that's part of the reason why pickleball's become so popular with this age group, because it is a way to meet people. Anyway, the S in SIP stands for social connection. The next challenge that people face is the I, identity. Who am I really? Many people, when they go through their professional lives, have a very important business card. You know, I'm a director of this or a VP of that, and it opens doors and it allows them to get places that the name, their reputation, and their title allows them. But when that business card is no longer valid, when it doesn't open those doors, people often struggle with the issue of who am I now? What's my identity? Then we move on to a fundamental human need, the P, which is purpose. Why do I get up in the morning? And when we're working, I mean, we have clients to serve, we have bottom line to meet, we have lots of reasons why we have purpose in our lives. But when that purpose disappears, it becomes pretty aimless for a lot of people unless they re-engage in something else that's purposeful. And when we talk about purpose, there are really two types of purpose. One is big P purpose, which is like, I'm going to save the rainforest or, conquer world hunger or something like that. And then there's the little P purpose, which is more about making a difference in someone else's life. And then the final S in SIPs is structure. And again, when we're working, the work week is punctuated more or less by 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And we know what we're doing. We have a calendar and we know what we're doing each day of the week. But when people step away, now they find themselves 7 days a week, each day looking the same as the last one. And actually, if you consider morning, noon, and evening for 7 days, that's 21 time slots a week that we need to think about filling. So those are some of the challenges that pretty much everybody faces when they make this transition away from their business or their career or profession. But I have to say, for business owners, it's even more challenging because business owners are used to being in control. They're used to having the power, the status, the responsibility, the sense of achievement from running their business. And when that is all stripped away, many of them flounder. And some of the symptoms of this floundering really are isolation, depression, early death, maybe illness first and then dying too young. And it's all because they haven't replaced all of those things that their careers and businesses provided with anything new in their next chapter.
So, Susan, you said about, they retire, this whole thing started, you retire, you think that's the end goal, right? You're working so hard to retire and be able to live the good life. And I've heard story after story of people, they get to the point they retire and then within a year, they've had a heart attack and die. Or they go and they retire and they go and play golf in Florida. And they think this is the bomb. And after a couple months of that, it's 6 months or whatever it is, it's like, okay, I'm sick and tired of doing this. I'm bored. I need something to do. I need some purpose. I need something to go kind of fire me up. And these are, it's an interesting dilemma is that when the people go to retire, so when someone retires and they go into retirement, take out of action, basically, they think they've made it and it's done. But they don't see these problems, these holes, the SIPs that you've identified. Having it very clear, and I kind of bunched it into the first one was social connections, a community. Like you need your tribe, you need your community to be wrapped around you. And then it went from there. It went who, what, why. Who am I? Why am I here? And then what am I going to do with my structure? So the who, the why, the what, the identity, purpose, and structure. Having knowledge of that ahead of time and realizing that that's coming, it's like half the battle, I would imagine, is knowing that this is coming. But again, most financial advisors and accountants, I definitely wasn't trained on this. No accountants were trained on this and thinking, okay, when you go to retire, we'll set up the structures and give you the cash flow. And we just assume, boom, you're going to be happy. But now you've shifted over and you've seen enough people do this and going, they're not happy because the SIPs or the seeps, right? There's there's a draining of the life energy that's seeping out because of the sips, right? And you've identified that. First of all, just for our listeners, if you're looking to retire, it's not just about having enough money to retire. It's like having enough purpose, having your identity, your structure, their social connections. Now you kind of know that there's more things out there. What can they do to prepare themselves for it? Like, so how do you engage with them to help them through this process? Because I'm assuming you've probably worked with people that have already gone, they're already on the deep end, they've done the golfing down in Florida, and they're despondent. And now all of a sudden a financial advisor goes, Susan, we need your help here. We need, my client's really distraught. Bring them in at the front end. And then you've got a front end load where you're actually preparing them ahead of time. What's been the process for you? I guess there's two kind of situations. One is you're front end loading and preparing the person for retirement, so they're coming in prepared. And then the other one is kind of like treating the patient. I think of it as a medical system. Yeah. You're treating the sickness is the back end versus making them healthy moving forward. So like the proactive medicine versus the reactive.
Absolutely. And we see people and work with people at really all three stages. One is those types of people that are good planners, that they have, their financial plan is all buttoned down. They know their tax plan and they like to have a plan in place. So that's the ideal. And that might be a couple of years out from when they know they're going to exit. Then we see people that are literally on the cusp of retirement. For example, a CEO that knows that December 31st is going to be his last day as CEO. And then it's like, now what? The day after you walk out, the door closes behind you, your retirement party's over, you've turned in your parking pass. Now what? And then we also see people that have retired thinking, and some do. Let me tell you honestly that there are some people that really embrace this time of life without any challenges whatsoever. But typically there's a correlation between the level of achievement and the degree of struggle. So the higher you are, the more you struggle. If you've been kind of a factory worker where you're bored with your job and you've physically spent with doing manual labor, and you're just so happy to be relieved of that. But if you've logged your career in your business and you've reached the pinnacle, then that's where the challenges lie. So a lot of people will go into this next chapter and then they'll say, that was kind of like a honeymoon. Everything was perfect. But like all honeymoons, it comes to an end. And then the now what comes in. So we work with people really at all those three stages, the pre-planners on the cusp of retirement and already retired, but are coming back saying, there's got to be more to this. When you said the higher the success, the bigger the struggle, right? The higher the success, the bigger the struggle. And I would imagine inside that word success is a continuum of what that means for what people like. Could be monetary success, it could be status success, it could be creative success. Like, for example, for myself, like I started when I left my first business partnership and I started up my new accounting firm, I created something brand new, fresh and new, and it was my baby. And then when I sold it, I was like, I had created something fresh and new from the ground up, which a lot of entrepreneurs do. They come and they build it, blood, sweat, and tears all the way up. They build it, they get it to be something. And then when it goes away, the success, maybe not in monetary terms, could be like this big money win in terms of success, but it was successful from creating something from scratch and building it up and nurturing it. It's like a child when it leaves the house. As all of a sudden you're like, we're empty nesters now. How do we deal with this? So, I mean, I can understand that. I understand that piece, and then there's, the status, like, so there's a kind of money, there's creative, and then there's a status, like, especially like you were talking about the CEO who's got this position and you've got this great status and you've worked your way up from the bottom of the company all the way up the ladder. You put in your time and now you're here at the pinnacle. And these are people that have worked hard to get to where they were. And then when that's gone away, there's like, what's left to do? Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where our work really starts. Is right. That figuring out that next chapter. And so, when you want to get in shape, the best practice is to hire a trainer And 25 years ago, who had a trainer? Nobody. Everyone said, just go to the gym, do your push-ups, your sit-ups, you'll get in shape. But we know now that working with a trainer is a best practice if you want to get fit and maintain your health and energy. So we believe that working with someone to help you through this phase of life is also a best practice. It's not even a profession yet. We're still on sort of the, let's say, leading edge of the notion that people should work with a professional to plan their next chapter. And fortunately, we've developed a pretty ironclad process to take people through. It starts with an assessment tool. So many people have been railroaded into their business, their career, and they may have had an interest, a passion when they were in their teens or 20s that kind of got sidelined when they had to make money and work. And oftentimes those old interests and those old passions they had are the raw material for figuring out something in their next chapter. For entrepreneurs who have always had that entrepreneurial spirit and have always been used to building things, that's not going away. So maybe they're the ones that start a new enterprise. And I'm kind of putting myself in that category. Because when I started my wealth practice, like you, I started from scratch, built it, became very successful. And then when I sold it, it was like, but I'm still an entrepreneur. So how am I going to put that to work? So for me, it was finding a problem that needed a solution. And that was the genesis, really, of starting Next Chapter Lifestyle Advisors. So anyway, getting back to go ahead.
I was going to say that's where the connection is here for you and me, for the listeners, is we're both in strategic coach. And one of the kind of the baselines that Dan Sullivan has kind of put out there, says, why would you retire for something you love to do and gives you purpose and gives you your 4 freedoms of money, relationships, time, and purpose? Why would you retire from that? And that kind of ties back into your higher success and the bigger struggle you have from it, is that, or shall we say the second person, let's say they don't like their job, you're just working to get to the end, and that's all about what you're doing. For the entrepreneur, it's about creating and having purpose in life and never wanting to retire. And exactly. So the thing is,
I hate that word retirement, and we need to retire the word retirement. We sometimes call it rewirement, and that's why we call it next chapter, because it really is part of the life journey and what's next in this journey of life. So retirement's a terrible word, but we haven't found a word in the English language yet that replaces it, because as you just alluded to earlier, retirement means put out of use. Who wants to be put out of use? Yeah.
Right. And so if we can, it's about, this is your next phase of life. This is the next iteration of who you are. And again, figuring out who you will be in that next iteration. As if people thinking I'm going to be the same person in quote unquote my next chapter than I am in the first chapter, called the first chapter being my business career and then going into retirement. If you think you're going to be the same person in there than you were over there, you're mistaken, because it's a different scenario. It's a different it's a different playground. You got to play a different part. And so it's about reinvention. And I guess once your clients and customers that you're working with, and they see this as an opportunity to actually grow and become somebody new, it's got to be kind of exciting at some point that people get their eyes go wide and go, oh, wait a second, I get to reinvent myself. How fun is this?
Exactly. And I have a story to tell you about a gentleman named Rob, who was a helicopter pilot in the U.S. and fought in Vietnam. He flew helicopters during the Vietnam War. And one day after the war ended, they just shut down his whole unit. So overnight, he was out of a job as a helicopter pilot. And he tells a story that for 6 months, he sat there staring at a blank wall. What am I going to do now? Then, fortunately, he had the good luck to run into my business partner, Marianne. They were at the same dinner party. They got chatting, and she was able to work with him to dig back into his past, where he said, I always liked to write, but obviously that got put on hold when he was earning his keep during flying helicopters. So he rekindled his love of writing. Fast forward, today he has 2 books that have been widely acclaimed. and he's writing a screenplay for a movie. This man is on fire. He is so excited about what he's doing. And it all stemmed back to those early days in probably high school, maybe even in college, where writing was something he really enjoyed. So oftentimes the clues for the next chapter are buried in our past, but not always. Sometimes people want to go on a journey of new discovery, something they've never done before. And I think here of another client of ours. He was actually a financial advisor, sold his practice, was pretty much floundering. And when we did the assessment with him, the Success Finder assessment tool is what it's called, that I do and did with him, there was something in there with humor and entertainment and something lurking there that was not about being a financial advisor. And I brought it to his attention. I said, Jim, there's something here to do with entertainment, humor. What is it? He said, I almost hate to tell you, but I've always wanted to write comedy and perform stand-up comedy. And
I like this guy.
Yeah. And so, this gave him the permission then to say, I'm not crazy. This is in me. And go on and pursue the education, the training, and the performance, and so on. So he had never done that before, but it was inside him. And this is what the assessment tool does, is brings to the forefront these unique attributes of each person. And that's the raw material then to start planning this next chapter. Beyond that, then we have a model for developing this framework, and it's called the happiness portfolio. And if you're a financial advisor, you're familiar with the concept of a portfolio and the fact that a good portfolio is both diversified and balanced. And therefore, the analogy for having a life that consists of a variety of interests and activities, and one that has some balance to it as well. So there are 8 areas of the happiness portfolio, and we get our clients to think about each of these 8 areas and develop a plan for each of them. But like all plans, unless it's implemented, it can just sit on the shelf and not really be put into use. So this final step of our 5-step process is to actually hold people accountable. And to do that, we have meetings with them every few months just to say, you said you were going to sign up for your gym membership and lose 5 pounds. Have you done it? You were going to dust off your resume and applied for that board seat. You're going to go back to school, take a course. Maybe you volunteer. Whatever it is, it's part of that happiness portfolio for the person that we're working with.
Right. You can't manage what you don't measure. I'm going to ruin this quote, but if you measure something, you can manage it. But if you measure something and report back to somebody on it, it multiplies infinitely. Like you have way more results if you actually have to report it back to somebody. So that's part of your accountability process. It's not only we've gone back, we've done the analysis, we've figured out what you need to do, what you want to do in life. Here's the next steps. Now we're going to hold you accountable, which is actually, that's when it's the terra firma. That's when the rubber meets the road and you actually get traction on that because you need that accountability. So, because as we know, like that's why we go to strategic coach. You come back once a quarter, you report back, you figure out your next quarter, you go on connection calls, and it's this accountability that causes traction. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Wow. And so you were working with, you have a big vision. And I remember, when you and I first met and we were talking about this is why we hit it off so well, is because we both had the same vision of what was going on in the professional space when it came to business owners and the advice that they were getting from their accountants or lawyers, their financial advisors or bankers. Like they weren't working together to give the client what they needed. And that needs to be more of a holistic approach, like what we're doing at MBA, which is like, we don't just look at, we're going to file your taxes. It's like, no, we call it the 4 planning pillars. What's your business plan, retirement plan, estate plan, and your wealth plan? What are those plans? What are you doing? And is it getting closer to where you want to go in the future? And you were like, yeah, you go to retire, you're looking even another step out, which is, what are you doing with the social circles? What are you doing with your identity? How are you coming up with your purpose and what do you have, what's the structure of your day, you're going up even a bigger picture.
Exactly. And that's why we feel that, we all have these circles of collaboration, the other professionals that professional advisors work with. And this is one seat that's been missing at this table, is this personal lifestyle planning, which actually ties all the other areas together. Because why are you working? Why do you care about minimizing your taxes? Why do you care about maximizing your portfolio? Why do you care? It's because you want to use that, let's say, augmented wealth or smart planning to live a better life. And so this goes back to my whole philosophy, which was the subject of the first book that I wrote in 2004 called The Rich Life, Managing Wealth and Purpose. Because often there's a disconnect. People are just so interested in maximizing the money, the financial side, that there's no connection to the purpose of that wealth that they've created. So that's why it's so important to connect the dots. Yes, use all the technical people, the tax planning, the estate planning, financial planning, critically important. But that's been the missing element, is tying all that to the why. Why are you doing all this? So my whole philosophy of living a rich life boils down into what I call the mantra for a rich life, which is live well, whatever that means to you. It could be having a second or third home. It could be, sending your kids to private school. I don't know. It's different for everybody. The second part of the rich life mantra is giving back. And we all feel better when we give, when we share what we have, what we know. It doesn't have to be financial. It can be mentoring, teaching, volunteering, but some way that we're helping others to get ahead. And of course, when people get older, they like to think about, how am I going to be remembered? They start reading obituaries in the newspaper of their friends, and they think, well, what about me? How am I going to be remembered? What's my legacy? So when we think about this happiness portfolio, the foundation or the pedestal that it sits on is this philosophy of living a rich life. Live well, give, leave a legacy.
Cool. I really like that. There's a technique that I've used with the Account Success Formula, and that's where I met Peter, and that's how I became a partner at MBA, was we were working together under the Account Success Formula, which is what you and I had first talked about, and started going, yeah. We see eye to eye on what needs to happen for the business owner. And I said, when you're talking to your clients, go 7 layers deep. Go 7 layers deep. And it was actually Dean Graziosi was the one I heard come up with this first. It said, go 7 layers deep with a question. I was like, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, ask the person, what do you want to do? They say, minimize taxes. Why do you want to minimize taxes? To have more money in my pocket. Why do you want to have more money in your pocket? If you go if you do that question at least 7 times, you start getting down to the real heart of the matter, what's really important to them. And once you understand what's really important to the client, what they really want, then we can apply our technical training and our planning and our collaborations with the other professional advisors to help them get that. But it's that first, most accountants live on the surface level. And I would imagine most financial advisors live on the surface level. They're not going deep enough. They're not getting to the root of the issue, which is, what do the people really, really want? And the interesting thing that I've found is a lot of the times people don't even realize what they want because no one's taken them through that process. So I'd imagine your process of walking them through all this gets them to the point where, like, they have these huge aha moments and they're like, I never even realized that's what I want.
Exactly. So that is the case when we work with individuals and couples on their next chapter. But to your point about working with professional advisors, you and I were both trained in the technical side of things. We were never trained to really have the right kind of conversations to get at those 7 layers, as you call it. So part of our program for professional advisors is providing them with the template for a guided conversation. Because it's very awkward for many of them to start to go into this area without some form of guidance, without some form of, let's say, practice or training. So you and I have both been in strategic coach, and we know the power of the R factor question, and we know the power of the DOS conversation, dangers, opportunities, strengths. So we've taken the roots of those questions, the DOS and the R factor question, and built them into the scorecard template that we provide and train advisors to use. I did this. I've been in coach for 25 years, and it took me probably more than a decade to start really using R factor and DOS. And I remember the very first time that I brought it up in a client meeting, I was nervous. That's not what I was used to talking about. I could talk all day about the markets and stocks and bonds and the economy and this mutual fund and that money manager. But to start to get deep like that with a client, it took a lot of courage. But I'll tell you what happened when I started to use it. I got so comfortable. I looked forward to those conversations, and what came out of them was amazing. How people, after an hour of just having that guided conversation, people would say, gee, how'd you learn so much about me? We just were together in an hour. Or they'd say, I think I can trust you. I didn't talk, they did. But somehow that conversation built the foundation for trust in the relationship. And ultimately, whether you're an accountant or a financial advisor, you want those relationships. You want them to be enduring. You want them for the long term. You never want those good clients to leave. And that's what it takes, because these days when, let's say, fees are being challenged, there's lots of competition. AI can come in and do many of the functions that people used to do. So where's the value? And I believe the value is really in those deeper conversations, which then lead to an action plan, which then bring in the right resources to help people.
Yeah, we're completely in alignment there. I've been calling this waving the flag for a while to the accountant, saying, you got to get on the right conversation with your clients to understand what they really want, to get in front of this AI wave I've been calling it for 10 years, and it's not until the last year and a half or whatever that AI is really now coming to the forefront, and everybody's starting to go, oh man, this is really coming. And I'm like, yeah, like 90% of what the accountants do on the transactional side is going to be AI-able. But understanding what the client really wants and being able to use AI to give them the right solution and have that relationship, that's where the real value is going to come in, right?
Exactly.
It's like anybody goes on and just types in their situation into ChatGPT or into an AI, and it kicks back and tells them what to do. It's missing all of the subtle nuances. It's missing the human component of humans, exactly. Right? It's really missing that part. And, to come back to that, following a template and having the right conversation. When I first started doing like the 4 planning pillars conversations with clients and asking them what they really wanted with their life first, and then doing those 4 planning pillars, this was well before I even got into coach. I was like, that's the fun conversation, because now we're talking about their future and what they want and where they're going. And they get fired up. And when they get fired up, I get fired up, because I'm like, oh, I can help you get there. And when I get fired up about getting them there, then they get fired up. And it's just this energy that elevates it. And you'll never want to go back to the old conversations ever again. Like you'll never go back. I remember when I first started in public practice, I was a tax specialist, so I could quote every section of the act, 13 brackets, 21.1 states, this, blah, blah, blah. And clients just stare at you blankly, like they're not understanding a word you're saying, but you're trying to show off your prowess and your knowledge and your in-depth, all the schooling and the work that you've done to get this knowledge. They don't care. They only want you to help them get to their chosen future. And so just having that conversation paves the way for that value creation. And that's why we're doing that in MBA. That's our main driver. It's like, have the conversation, figure out where you want to go, then we'll apply the tax planning around it and work with your other professional advisors to make sure that we're all on the same page, getting you to your future. It's simple. You and I just get it. It's so simple. But yet when you speak to a client for the first time like this, they have that reaction. Like you just explained it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. How do you know me? I trust you. I know you. I get, like, no one's ever talked to me this way. No accountant has ever talked to me this. I remember people saying that to me. like, an accountant's never asked me these questions before. I'm like, well, then how did they know how to structure a business? How did they know that? And then they look at me and I went, yeah, they didn't know how to structure it properly. So that's why I love.
You know what that leads to then? Yeah. That leads to lifelong loyalty, a deeper relationship. And what everybody wants is referrals. They talk to their friends. They don't say, my accountant put in this complicated structure and it goes like this. And in the end, I saved, some tax. They might say that. But what they're really saying is, wow, I've got the best accountant in the world. He gets me. She gets me. We have this great relationship. I can call them about anything, even if it's not a decision that's closely related to tax. And then that's where you become that truly valuable, more than trusted advisor to the client. And that's the basis of these lifelong relationships that sometimes turn into friendships, but very often can stay at a professional level, but a deep, deep relationship.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we changed. And originally I changed the accounting firm business model, because having those conversations with clients, the accountants were billing by the hour. So they're all like, oh, how do I charge for this? So accountants really don't want to have this conversation. I think the financial advisors have so much more breathing space to have the conversations because they're not constrained by this billable hour and the ominous presence of, I got to charge for this time. So your position, financial advisors are positioned better to actually have this conversation.
Yeah. In fact, I had clients say to me, I don't want to call my lawyer because I know the meter will be ticking, but can you, and then they would ask a somewhat legal question. And they knew that it was fair game because we're fee-based, they know what they're paying. It's not by the hour. They're paying on the basis of assets under management. And so oftentimes we'd be the first call on a question that ultimately would end up with an accountant or a lawyer. And that's where I so admire the work that you've done in the accounting space, because you're teaching accountants, you're taking them away from that mentality of my time is what's valuable. No, It's the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience. So why should you be measuring that in minutes and hands on the clock when it could be the opportunity to share wisdom and experience to help the client?
Yeah. And thank you for that. The ability for a client to pick up the phone and call, I just want them to call before they do something. If you're not sure, pick up and call and ask. Then if I'm like, oh, well, this is a job that Susan needs to be involved in because it impacts her this way, because I know this is what she's doing over here for you and what we're doing over on our side. I want to make sure they connect because I've already worked with you. So it's about accessibility to your professional team and knowing that your team is collaborating with one another.
Exactly. And the foundation of all of this planning, all the professional services planning, is the life plan of the client. Once the life plan is figured out and articulated and discussed, then the financial plan, the tax plan are just a natural next layer. And then products, especially for financial advisors, don't even need to be sold. They're just solutions to help the client get to where they want to go.
Bingo.
And so when you start with the life plan, then you do the financial plan, financial products happen next, and then you're giving that client that rich life experience, which is kind of the pinnacle of that pyramid.
Again, Susan, I love what you're doing. I love that the mission is to educate financial advisors on how to support their clients through this transition. I think that is such an important mission. And I want to make sure that all our listeners here, whether you're a financial advisor listening to this or you are a business owner and you want to have access to you, can you tell them where to find you so they get access to this incredibly valuable information? And for a listener, if you're thinking about retiring, then do this. Make the contact before you go into retirement and then have to do the old treating the sickness model as opposed to being a proactive, healthy model forward.
Exactly. So our website is www.nextchapterlifestyleadvisors.com. And my email address is Susan, that's SUSAN at nextchapterlifestyleadvisors.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well and love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So one of those three ways, we'll definitely be happy to respond and have a chat with you and see where we can figure out your next chapter together. And if you're a financial advisor, be on the leading edge of this. You can position yourself as a thought leader, as someone who is ahead of the curve by starting to incorporate these kinds of conversations and all the tools and resources that we have for financial advisors, incorporating that into your practice. You won't regret it. It'll really pay dividends in your relationships and your referrals and your overall business success and in your legacy.
I love it. I love it. Susan, thank you for being on the podcast.
A pleasure, Eric.
If you're a business owner or CPA who believes the accounting profession has let you down, then please reach out to us at www.mbacpa.ca so we can have a chat to see if we're a fit to work together. We're always looking forward to talking to you. See you next time.